In 2026, Latin America holds its breath. After the capture of Nicolás Maduro by the United States, a message is sent: no government is untouchable. Latin America is no longer safe. The capture of Nicolás Maduro opened a severe security breach across the continent. No head of state in Latin America can feel secure anymore. The declaration made by the President of Chile makes that clear. Donald Trump publicly calls the President of Colombia a troublemaker. A phone call, he says, "Colombia can sleep." The message is unmistakable. Colombia can sleep for now, not because it is free or well defended, but because the United States allows it. The unity of Latin American countries has always been historically difficult. Large distances, geographical isolation, and structural inequalities have weakened cooperation among their peoples. Now, with increasingly aggressive moves by the United States, the challenges are far greater and the risks enormous. Trump behaves as if he were the new ruler of Venezuela, a position that so far has gone uncontested by any European power. Europe remains cornered by its NATO commitments and its need to keep the United States engaged in the war in Ukraine. Delcy Rodriguez claims to be engaging in highly sophisticated diplomacy with Trump to protect Venezuelan interests. But this remains unproven. Meanwhile, the largest country in South America remains ambiguous, torn between Chinese investments and infrastructure projects, or risking distance from the United States and facing Trump's anger, with possible sanctions or other forms of aggression that will be discussed in this video. Latin America has failed to establish effective military cooperation. Today, Colombia stands alone, unable to rely on any regional support if Donald Trump decides to interfere. Ironically, the risk of a full-scale invasion is very low. Latin American countries are extremely difficult to invade due to their geography and large populations that would not remain passive. At the same time, these countries fear economic punishment. Tariffs and sanctions imposed by the United States could easily collapse their economies. This risk calculation is not in their favor unless they can rely on Chinese trade to counteract potential sanctions. Even with direct Chinese support, Latin America could still face the same fate as Venezuela: ships seized and heads of state kidnapped under fabricated charges and accusations. As intelligence agencies are highly experienced in regime change operations, their capacity to destabilize governments is well known and historically feared. Many Latin American countries have already suffered the consequences of coups sponsored by US administrations. Brazil's elections are scheduled for October 2026. Lula is expected to face strong competition from a political heir of Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro is a known ally of Donald Trump and would almost certainly receive Washington support in a return to power, in exchange for favoring US interests over Chinese influence. Lula should expect all forms of interference: social media bots, coordinated disinformation campaigns, and even cyber attacks. To protect Brazil's democracy, the government must strengthen intelligence monitoring and accept that the United States is no longer a trustworthy partner. In terms of intelligence and counterintelligence technology, the US is far ahead of any Latin American country. This leads to an unavoidable conclusion: Brazil will be forced to choose a side. Brazil's internal political landscape is deeply shaped by regional differences, and these differences have real geopolitical consequences. In the Northeast, Lula and his party historically enjoy strong support, rooted in long-standing social policies and alignment with progressive economic agendas, a base that tends to care more about issues like sovereignty, inequality, and regional solidarity. In contrast, parts of the Southeast and South, including Sao Paulo and surrounding states, often show weaker enthusiasm for Lula. More centrist or conservative electorates who prioritize economic growth, market stability, and pragmatic foreign relations over regional politics. Surveys consistently show these divisions in presidential approval and voting patterns across regions. This matters because it shapes how pressure on Brasilia is perceived at home. When external powers push narratives about Venezuela or Colombia, those messages resonate very differently across Brazil. In regions where voters are less invested in Latin American integration or skeptical of Lula's foreign policy focus, there is less grassroots pressure on the government to defend its positions. More room for narratives that prioritize economic ties or stability over regional political solidarity. Meanwhile, Lula's core supporters, especially in the northeast, are more likely to expect their government to defend principles of sovereignty and resist external interference. These internal divisions create political friction that can limit how strongly the federal government can respond to foreign interventions in neighboring countries. Only China can currently compete with the United States in high technology. Its partners would be willing to defend their strategic assets against Trump's advances. If all else fails, the United States could attempt to block Brazilian naval vessels in the South Atlantic, using the same strategy previously applied in the Caribbean against Venezuela. This could include the seizure of ships and hostile actions against coastal cities such as Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo. If the situation escalates, Brazil would be forced to acquire Chinese military equipment, naval drones and anti-aircraft missile systems. This year represents a turning point for Latin America. Trump has shown he is willing to break international law to protect his interests, even if it means threatening his own allies